Hello to all and welcome to Generation 2020. I hope you're all having a good time and great sessions over here. Thank you for being here with us. In this session, we have Heuristics from Greece and she will be presenting us. It's easy to create a good looking product, but how about a useful one? So, hello Eleftheria, how are you?
Hi there, I'm fine, thanks. And you?
I'm also fine. Thank you for joining us and being with us with this presentation. Are you ready to rock?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, fine. So without further delays, I will hand it over to you so you can start your presentation.
Thank you. Uh, all right. Hi, how are you, everybody? I hope that you are all well. I hope that you are all fine and staying home and healthy. Thank you very much for joining me in this session. It's easy to create a good looking product, but how about a useful one? So first, let me introduce a little bit more myself. I'm coming from Greece. I am an app developer and also a UX and UI enthusiast, which means I really, really love to work with UX and UI, hence this presentation. And also I'm a content creator. I'm producing articles and videos about UX, UI, and of course, coding. You can find me on my social media. I'm very active on Twitter, so if you have any question that you can't ask me right now, you can always find me there. Alrighty, let's get started. So, we are going to talk about UX versus UI. So, user experience versus user interface. What is it and what are the differences? What do people do in these disciplines? And then we will continue with the heuristics. Again, what are they? Why are they important? And how you can use them. Either you are a designer, a programmer, a developer, a coder, or just a tech enthusiast, how you can use heuristic to build a better product, a better app, or a better website. Then we will continue with the 10 usability heuristics, and here you will gain some very practical tips. And finally, we have the do's and don'ts of UX and good and the bad of UI. It's the last two things that I'm going to be talking about, and I think that again you will gain some very useful information. Alrighty. First things first, we have UX, which stands for user experience, and we have UI, which stands for user interface. If you go on Google or if you start searching, you will find a ton of information about these two things. But the problem is that usually the writer or the creator usually speaks only about one perspective, and this is the perspective of the user. So how the user sees user interface and user experience. But here we are not going to talk only about the user, but we are going to talk also about you, that maybe you are a developer, a designer, a coder, or like whatever. Let's start. We will start from the user's perspective just because I think it's a little bit easier to understand it, but then we will continue also to the designer's perspective. So, as a user, it's an interface is what the user interacts with a product, what taps or clicks on, and it's always localized in a device. From the other hand, the user experience from the user's perspective is how a user interacts with a product, how a user feels as a result of that interaction, and the whole experience is localized by the physical body. Is he cracking a smile? Is he disappointing? This is user experience. From the other hand, from the designer's perspective, I will start with an analogy. Like, imagine this big icicle. The only thing that you'll see, it's only the tip of that icicle. This is the UI, but it's not only that. Underneath that big tip is also something like a big mountain, and it's also the water that holds everything together. This is how we designers see things. So from the so the user interface is what you can see and interact with, but the user experience is what you can see along with what you can't see and what holds everything together. This is from the designer's perspective. So, what is UX really? And UX can be a lot of things. It can be about technology, it can be about marketing, it can be about designing, of course. But there are also some other rules that can define it a little bit better. It can be subjective. So, does the user connect emotionally with the app by cracking a smile? Are the icons and the illustrations understandably enough and aesthetically pleasing to the eye? Is the user pleasantly surprised by the animated interactions or a feedback mechanism? And from the other hand, it can also be objective. So does the user actually can do what he wants to do? Is the speed of response from the app satisfactory? And is a swiping gesture or a tap event more convenient for the user? These are all the things that a UX designer should do and should start thinking of. Now, I will give you another example trying to make things a little bit more clear. Would you prefer a ride sharing app that doesn't indicate where your driver is, where you're standing up at, what time is the driver coming, and doesn't allow you to make multiple stops for you and your friends, doesn't allow you to save your favorite destinations? Or would you prefer another app, again, a ride sharing app, that is personalized to your needs? It lets you save your favorite destinations. It helps you like do things with one or two clicks. So think about that. Which one would you prefer? And now maybe this is like a quite a drastical example, and maybe sometimes we also see our apps or our products as the perfect ones because we are the ones that building them and we know how things are done and we think that everything is easy. But we have to go one step back and really think of some rules and really check them and see if things are working as they're supposed to work. So I think that by now you have understood that UX is important, but let's also see why is it so important. It is because at its core, UX is about putting people before technology, and this is the key. The focus is always on creating positive experiences for users, and the result is a win-win scenario both for the users and the businesses. So now let's see, what does a UX designer do? Which, like by one sentence, we could say the practice of UX. And actually, before saying what does a UX designer do, let's check or let's talk a little bit about history. Yes, history. Maybe some of you don't like history that much, but this is important and I'm going to be quick with that one. So this man that you're seeing on your screen is Don Norman, and he is a pioneer in UX. He is the father of UX. This man worked in Apple, and he started as an electrical engineer, but then he continued his studies in psychology, and the most important one, he started to observe how people interact with computers. He was the first one that did that. And of course, all that knowledge went back to Apple, and now Apple has all the design that it has. This man, again, it's like really, really important, and he also have written a ton of books. I think that the most well-known one is The Design of Everyday Things. And if someone is starting his journey on UX and UI, I would totally suggest them to read that book. I think that you can find it for free over the internet. Okay, now let's go back to our original question. What does a UX designer do? A UX designer solves real problems for real people, and he is working towards satisfaction and usefulness of a product. He's never alone. He always has other people with him, so he will have marketeers, other designers, developers, and of course, and users. And when he has all of these people, he will start asking questions such as, who are the users and what do they want? What are the many features the user needs? What are their current behaviors? How will the product connect with them? What type of content users want and need? And what does the product look like? And when he has the answers to these questions, he will go even more deeper and deeper and deeper. So he will ask more and more questions. And again, he's never alone. He has other people with him, and he will interact with them, and he will make plans with them. Let's continue with some of the jobs that a UX designer has to do. And trust me, he has to do a lot of things. Here I have a pyramid that shows only the most basic things, like this is a basic structure. I will start from bottom to top, and I'm not going to go into much of detail because you could speak forever about this kind of things. So down you have user research and analysis, then content strategy, information architecture, interaction design, and visual design. Now, in the step of user research and analysis, which is from what every product and every designer should start with, you have the user interviews, user behavior studies, focus groups, and surveys. And when you have all your data, you will continue as a designer to creating user personas, user stories, empathy maps, and customer journeys. When all of those things are done, you will continue with the next step, which is content strategy. This step is very crucial, but some people think that maybe it's kind of boring because you will work with things such as writing product copy and microcopy, selecting the right wording and tone for the target users, and writing email messaging and designing emails. It's really important, but sometimes people don't really like doing this kind of things. And then you will continue as a designer with that information architecture. This is the lifeblood. This is what connects the two steps below with the two that are coming, and how the data are organized and presented like heavily influences how the product is going to be consumed and is going to be used. So information architecture is really important. In that steps, you will do things such as cart sorting, sitemaps, wireframes, user flows, and a lot more things. And then as we continue to the interaction design, here the designer will do things such as user interfaces that are easy to navigate, micro interactions that enhance feedback, screen states for relying system studies, and interactive prototyping. And when those things are done, he will continue with a visual design. This is the last step of our pyramid for a UX designer. And here in that step, as well as in the previous one, not only UX designers work, but also UI designers. But we are going to see that in a bit. So here UX designers are making sure that some principles are there and the designers are working with those principles. So our colors are effectively done. Are we using typography, sophistication, and our design icons like good enough? So all of those things are things that a designer is working with. Sometimes if you are in a big company and if there are many UX designers, everyone will get something different. But if you are in a small company and maybe you're not even a designer, maybe you are just a coder or a developer, these are some of the things that you will have to do if you want to have like a nice product. So by now we talked about UX, and we talk about the perspective of the user and the perspective of the designer. But now let's switch gears and let's see some things about the UI as well. We're going to start seeing or having the same questions. So what is UI really? And a lot of people think that UI, it's only what it looks. It's only colors. It's only icons. But trust me and bear with me, it's not only that. And I will give you an example right now. UI can be audible. Imagine like Siri or Amazon's Alexa and stuff like that. All of these are software programs that you can play with them just by shouting some commands like beautiful stuff can happen. You can know the weather, you can play music, you can have all sorts of different information. This is audible. This is not icons, this is not typography. But also we have another example, this one. And again, I'm pretty sure that you have seen that one. It's a command line. UI can also be textual. I'm not saying it's pretty, but I'm saying that we have also a textual kind of format. Just by clicking something on a command line, the system interacts with that and it gives you again useful information or whatever you may need. This is a kind of UI. So why is UI so important? Because a well-designed UI adds value to product, it creates a friendly environment that users can understand, it establishes a strong and clear visual language, and it creates smooth interaction and an enriching experience. I'm pretty sure you don't want a bad UI, as many things can go wrong. Now let's see what does a UI designer do, which by one sentence, it's the practice of UI. But let's go back to our pyramid and let's see what he does here. He works more with the top two levels, the interaction design and the visual design. He has all the information that he needs from the 3 steps below that one. He has like pretty much everything, but he needs to focus on the design. So he will do the things that we mentioned, like buttons, colors, typography, and he will give the finishes touches to the whole product experience. A UI designer has to know a lot of things, has to have a lot of skills, such as typography, color theory, iconography, illustration, visual hierarchy, alignment layout, spacing, readability, and contrast. And all these elements work in conjunction to define a particular UI look and feel. Now, in the last step, which is the visual design, people focuses here on possible variations of the screen and how it will respond to user input. And again, here the designer has to apply design patterns effectively, create component libraries, establish complete design systems, and all of these kind of things. And of course, let's not forget that a designer has to be prepared for different kind of screens. So yeah, sometimes we tend to forget about these things, but we shouldn't. I think that this image tells well what I mean. And by now, you probably have understood the differences between UX and UI and also the similarities about these two disciplines. And from a user's perspective, these two things are quite distracted. So UI is what something looks like and UX is how it feels. But from a designer's perspective, things are not so simple. UX and UI are connected. UI cannot exist without UX. First, we have to have the UX, and then we can continue with the UI. Okay, and let's continue with our next part, which is heuristics. What are heuristics? Why are they important and how you can use them? And again, you don't have to be a designer to use heuristics. In simple terms, heuristics is making decisions with the information you have. And I will start with a quote that I really like, and it's coming from Don Norman. And it says, good design is actually a lot harder to notice than poor design, in part because good design fits our needs so well that the design is invisible. If you have good design, maybe no one even will notice it. But there you having a bad design and people will come for you. So heuristic evaluation, what is it and how it can be done? Heuristic evaluation is a key part of designing a great product that users will engage with and find the value. Its purpose is to detect usability issues that may occur when users interact with a product and identifies ways to resolve them, and is conducted against a predetermined set of usability principles known as heuristics. And this is what we are going to be talking about. Let's see in details what are heuristics. There are numerous heuristics, but we are only going to focus in some of them. And this is because although the end goal of all those heuristics maybe is similar, maybe it's the same, the efficiency and the validity are not. So there are a lot of heuristics, as I said, and a lot of inspection methods. Some of them, you can see them on this table. So you have the cognitive walkthrough, the user testing, and the heuristic analysis. There are even more inspection methods. We're going to be focusing on the last column, so the heuristic analysis. And this is because it can be done by the system experts. And I hope that I will help you be a little bit closer to a system expert. And because, as I just said, the validity of that method is better from the others ones. So, how to conduct an effective heuristic evaluation? And here again, you have to answer some questions. As a designer, you have to answer some question by yourself and of course with other users. You have to define the scope of your evaluation and you have to ask yourself, what do I want to test? The second thing is that you have to know your end user, about who is this product for. Thirdly, you have to choose your set of heuristics, and this is also something that we are going to be talking about. So, which usability principles should be followed? And you have to set up an evaluation system and identify issues. This is really important. So, ask yourself, how will evaluators assess and report a usability issue? And last but not least, analyze and summarize the findings. Even if you have done like all the work, but you don't do the last step, which is like to analyze and track everything, then all the research that you've done, like it doesn't even matter. These are 5 steps that you have to follow in this order. Okay, so let's continue with some steps heuristic evaluators should identify over 80% of usability hitches. That number, 80%, is really big. So only 5 to 8 heuristic evaluators can help you can find 80% of your usability hitches. So of your usability, let's say, problems or issues. This is the third part with the 10 usability heuristics that are written by Jacob Nielsen in 1995. And I think that they are actually 10 simple rules that you should check your product or your app or whatever and check if your product meets those criteria. They are really helpful, and let's start seeing them. The first one is visibility of system status. What do we mean about that is like, if you check right now your phone, as soon as the screen lights up, you will have information about the weather, the time, notifications about social media. You will have your emails. You will have everything. But imagine that someone took all those things from you. How would you feel? It's probably the same with your user. The user wants to see things, and sometimes only a color or an icon can do the trick. Let the user see the information that he wants to see. The second rule is match between the system and the real world. The user already knows how to use a different system, so he will try to interact with the same way with your product, with your app, with your design. You want to keep that. You don't want to confuse the user. Something that had started a lot of years ago is actually the skeuomorphism design. This means that even the icons that you see here or in your phone, the designer wanted to take something real, for example, a compass or a folder or a bin, and transfer that into a digital format. So the user, maybe like years ago, maybe he didn't know what is a bin, but by having that digital thing and having it in a physical format, he could easier understand that. For us, because we are using phones and we're using websites for many years, of course we can understand that. But before that, people weren't like very easily connected with this kind of things. And let's continue to the third one, which is user control and freedom. Every system should have a clearly marked emergency exit mechanism. People often will interact with your product in a hurry, or maybe they will not be very concentrated in what they are doing. So you really have to give them the choice to go back or to undo an action, because sometimes, either you want it or not, they will make mistakes. So always give them the possibility to again go back or don't do something. Make sure, for example, that when you are deleting something, ask them, are you sure you want to do that? And always use this kind of small things, but really, really helpful for your user. The fourth thing, which is one of my favorite one, is consistency and standards. And as I've already mentioned, users already know how to use a system, and with the same mentality, they will go to your product and they will try to do the same things. For example, copy paste works everywhere the same. Do you think that this is done like by an error or a mistake? No, developers want to work in the same way. It's going to be easier for your users, so we want that. But of course, it's not only that. If you have icons for an action, again, let's say a delete thing, use always the same icon for that delete. Maybe you're using a bin, use always the same bin. And if you want to delete something, don't just say delete and the next time say erase or another word. Always stick to the same word, to the same icon. And I think that you get the point of what I'm trying to say. The next thing is error prevention. There are two kind of errors created by when the users interact with your product, and these are slips and mistakes. The sleeps are the things that pretty much we've already mentioned. These are the things that the user will do, maybe because he's in a hurry, maybe he's not very concentrated, maybe he will just misclick something. So of course you want to prevent that. You want to have actions such as undo, or making sure that the user has deleted something by having an extra pop-up. But from the other hand, we have some other errors and we call them mistakes. These things are more serious, and it means that we as developers or designers, we haven't done something correctly. We haven't understand something. Our mental model is wrong, and these things takes more time to be fixed. But this is usually not something by a user's fault. It's something because we haven't understand something correctly, and now the user taps something that he shouldn't tap. The next one is recognition rather than recall. And here we have like these two categories, but this time about our memory. Our memory can be divided in recognition and recall. And in simple terms, recognition is when you see something and you can understand that something that you see. And recall is when you have to go back to your memory to recall things. So things such as names or dates that you can't really think of, or it's hard of you to think. We don't want recall. We want recognition. And here in Coursera, you can see a good example out of it. So maybe a user starts typing something and he has not only the names of the classes, but he has some images, he has the institution that teaches that course, he has the degree that he will get with that course. You want to help user, and you can help your user by having recognition, so by having icons, by having maybe a useful pop-up, by having an autocomplete and things like that. The seventh thing is flexibility and efficiency of use. You have to know that you have like two kinds of users. Maybe you have your first time users, and also you have your power users. Power users are those people that are already using your product for a lot of time, and they are like the professionals ones. They know how to do stuff, and now they care only about doing things fast and with efficiency. You want to have things to help your users, your power users. So you want to have like hotkeys. Maybe you want to have some extensibilities. You want to have some like power features and stuff like that. But of course, you should also be really careful with your first time users as well. You should have like maybe a pop-up with some information and stuff like that to also help your first time users. Don't forget that you have like both of these worlds, because sometimes you maybe think that all your users are advanced because it's more helpful for you to design things, but it's not like that. Every user is different, and he has like a different mentality. Sorry. Let's continue to the eighth one, which is also one of my favorite, is aesthetic and minimal design. And I will start again with the quote: perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. You want your designs, so you want your products, your website, your apps to be decluttered, to be minimal, because otherwise the user, like there is a big chance for your users to get distracted by something else. Some simple tips that I can offer you here: if you are like a more beginner designer or programmer, start by adding a lot of white space. Don't add too many information, but do add a lot of white space, big font sizes, and only the most important stuff from your user. Take for example Google. Like when you first open Google, the only thing that you have is a search box, and that's it, nothing else. This is the best example of aesthetic and minimal design. You don't need many things, you just want the most basic things that your user needs. And after that, if you do provide the basics ones, then you can continue to a second page and give them more information. And ninth, help the users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. As I said earlier, whether you want it or not, your users will make mistakes, and maybe it's not even your fault. Maybe they're not very concentrated, they are in a hurry, maybe they will misclick something, and all of these kind of things. You should help them, and you should help them to recover from that error. For example, if in your system your user can upload an image, make sure that you tell the user what kind of images they can upload, so it will save them some time and probably some frustration. And last but not least, you have the help and documentation. You should always strive for having a perfect product, but because you have users that are not all of them like in the top level, you want to have some kind of help and documentation. And even if your users are in that top level, again, you want some help and documentation, because there are going to be some extra stuff for them as well, like some more powerful features or some kind of extensibility and stuff like that. So documentation should be always there. It should be written in a simple language. It doesn't have to be something big. Even a few words, even like a small text, can be really, really helpful. Okay, so that's where our 10 tips. I hope that they were helpful for you. And now we can continue with the do's and the don'ts of UX. This is going to be a quick part that, again, I hope that it will help you with all of your user experience stuff that you have to do. Okay, let's start. So, first of all, don't assume you know what users want. That's why you have the tests, that's why you have your users. Don't assume, but talk with them and observe them. Don't follow the hippo at the room. Hippo stands for the highest paid person's opinion. And do make the time and effort for user research. Don't just create a list of methods to check off. It's not just a to-do list, but it's work that you actually have to do. And do understand all research options and all strengths of each. Don't prototype too soon because this means money and time. So be really concentrated and know what you're doing. And do conduct scoping research, not just evaluative. Do focus on what people do rather than what people say. And I hope that I have make you really trust that point, that you have to observe people and you have to talk with people. If you can do only one thing, do conduct user testing. And don't overlook existing insight from customer care representatives. And of course, do collaborate. Designers, either UX designers or UI designers, are never alone. And if you are alone, then maybe it means there is a kind of a problem. Do find someone qualified to do your research, or hopefully after this session you will be one step closer of being able to do that research by yourself. And let's go to the final part of this session, which is the good and the bad of UI. This is going to be a sort of a small test for you. I'm not going to ask you anything after that test, but there are going to be some things, and I want you to think what kind of designer you are. So before we start with the small questions or tips about the UI designers, let's see one quote that I think that it can help you. And it says, a good designer is not the one who designs beautiful, usable, impressive interfaces. The main difference that sets apart a good designer from a bad one is the mindset. So, the designer's mindset. A good designer listens to everyone, from decision makers, team members, and stakeholders, whereas the bad one judges and suggests solutions all the time. Pick one. The good designer questions the status quo, but the bad one always follows the rule. We've always done it that way, so why not go with that one again? The good designers digs deep to find out real problems and needs, and not only try to fix symptoms. The good designer takes time to ask about what is missing and is always uncertain about his understandings and designs, whereas a bad one follows his assumptions and is always certain about his works, and he always thinks that his work is the perfect one. The good designer has many solutions and ideas and tries always to find issues and flaws in his work, whereas the bad designer has only one idea and tries to invest all of his time persuading everyone that his idea is the best one. The good designer loves working with others, revisits his thoughts, and has something to learn from everyone he meets, whereas the bad one loves to work alone, tries to confirm his thoughts, and thinks he knows everything. The good designer loves to be wrong and not to be right. He seeks feedback and he seeks praise. So again, choose which one are you. And last but not least, the good designer leads, whereas the bad one follows. And that was it, guys. If you have any question, of course, feel free to ask me either like right now or later. And I hope that you found this session quite useful. And I hope that it helped you either as a developer or a designer.
Thank you very much, Eleftheria. Thank you for your recent presentation. We have some questions here. Yes, I will post them to you. First one from Fernando Aguidas. Do you think material design is a good final design or just a minimal expression for clarity?
I think that it's something good and something that you should use it. And I say that because most of the developers or the designers are working having the material UI design like in mind. So this help every developer and every designer to have something with consistency. And for example, if you are building an Android app, all Android apps are pretty much similar, or let's say that they have pretty much the same icons, because designers are working with these kind of things. So I think that it's a good base. Of course, you can build upon that, but at first, maybe you should or could start with that.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question from Alessandro Barrero. Where I can find or buy heuristic formats to evaluate websites and applications?
I'm sorry, I didn't listen the last part where they can
Okay.
buy.
Heuristic formats to evaluate websites and applications.
If I understood the question correctly, I don't know where you can buy that thing, but maybe I didn't hear very well.
Well, okay, we can jump to another question. I'm not sure if I understood it right also. So another question from Stefano Givanti. How do you manage the difficult relationship between UX designers and software developers?
Sorry, but I'm afraid I can't hear you.
Okay, I can try. So I will repeat.
I'm sorry.
How do you manage the difficult relationship between UX designers and software developers? Hello?
Yeah?
Are you listening to me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you manage the difficult relationship between UX designers and software developers?
Okay, this is a good question, and
Yeah.
yes, it's a difficult situation. I think that both parts should be open to listen to the other part, and because I've been in both situations, both as a designer and as a developer, I think that what the designer has to do is to give a lot of data to the developers, because sometimes developers doesn't trust designers, and sometimes the developers things or wants to do stuff because they are easier for them. So as a designer, you should present your data and you should explain what are the things that should be done. But from the other hand, as a developer, you shouldn't think only about yourself and your work. You should be thinking also about what your user wants, and try to put yourself in the user's space. So what the user wants, and try to be open and listen to the designer.
Very well. Thank you. So we have another question from Fernando Aguilas. He would like to know how do you manage your work when it's mixed with code? For instance, Vue.js components involve both code and CSS design. Do you prepare first on structure artwork or anything?
I'm afraid that I can't hear you very well. Sorry, could you please speak a little bit louder?
Okay, so Fernando Aguilas would like to know how do you manage your work when it's mixed with the code? For example, Vue.js components involve both code and CSS design. Do you prepare first a structure of artwork or anything?
Again, if I listen correctly, I think that the first thing that someone should do is have a design, and that design should be well done. Because if you start coding that thing, it will take you more time, and it means more money. So first, having your design done nicely, and of course, if possible, test it with users, and then start writing your CSS or whatever you have.
I think, can you listen to me, Eleftheria?
Yeah, but not very well. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm not sure what's happening. So I think the question was more, how do you deliver your work to the software developers?
Okay. So how do I? Oh, You mean as a designer, how do I deliver my work?
Yeah. If you prefer a structure,
Okay.
artwork, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I hadn't listened very well. Um, there are many different ways that you can show your work, but I think that it depends. For example, how I do it is like either Photoshop or Illustrator, but again, I think that this depends. If you have like more experienced developers, then maybe even a prototype is enough. But this is also in case that you don't have time as a designer to do like a Photoshop or an Illustrator or something similar. And also sometimes the developers are doing the jobs of the designers, which is something that I wouldn't recommend. If you are a designer, talk with your developers and ask them how they prefer to have the final product, because I think that as a designer it's easier for you to create different kind of files to share them with them. And as a designer, as a UI designer, you should try to help your developers as much as possible, because a developer's work is not like having to deal with colors or font sizes or stuff like that.
All right. Thank you. I think we have no more questions. Thank you, Healtheria, for your great session. I hope to
Uh,
see you again in next year. And
Thank you very much. And if I didn't answer to some of your question, you can always find me on Twitter or on my other social media, and I will try to answer them as better as I can. But thank you very much for the invitation.